In court, my ex looked at the judge and said, "He's unstable. He lies to our daughter. I want full custody." The judge looked convinced. I couldn't speak. But then my 6-year-old stood up and said, "I brought a video from Mommy's phone. I think the judge should see eye to." The room fell completely silent as the screen turned on. Chapter 1, The Architect of Deception. Griffin Mercer knew from the age of 12 that observation was power. Growing up in Pittsburgh with a father who designed security systems and a mother who prosecuted white-collar criminals, he developed an eye for details others missed. This talent led him to become one of the most sought-after digital forensic analysts on the East Coast, specializing in retrieving evidence others believed was permanently deleted. At 36, Griffin had built an impressive life. His consulting firm provided critical evidence for high-profile legal cases. He owned a renovated Victorian home in a prestigious neighborhood. And 6 years ago he'd married Vanessa Harlow, a charismatic pharmaceutical sales representative whose confidence and ambition match his own. Their daughter, Sophia, was born a year later, a precocious, observant child who seemed to inherit Griffin's analytical mind. The first hairline fractures in their marriage appeared 3 years ago when Vanessa began working with Dr. Theo Blackwell, the newly appointed director of neuropharmacology at Pittsburgh Memorial Hospital. Vanessa's hours grew longer, her explanations vaguer. Weekend pharmaceutical conferences multiplied. Griffin noted the patterns, but said nothing, instead activating the digital security system he'd installed throughout their home. Cameras disguised as smoke detectors, microphones embedded in light fixtures, all feeding into encrypted storage only he could access. "Daddy, when is Mommy coming home?" Sophia asked one Friday evening, her small hands methodically arranging puzzle pieces on the living room floor. "She's another conference, sweetheart. She'll be back Sunday." Griffin sat beside his daughter, watching how she grouped pieces by color rather than shape, her own unique system. Sophia frowned, "But I heard her tell Uncle Preston she'd be at his lake house this weekend." Griffin's hand froze mid-reach for a puzzle piece. "Uncle Preston, when did you hear that?" "When she was on the phone in her bathroom, she thought I was watching TV, but I was getting my hairbrush." Sophia's blue eyes, identical to his own, looked up innocently. "Is Uncle Preston having a conference at his lake house?" Preston Wade wasn't Sophia's uncle by blood, but had been Griffin's best friend since college. The best man at their wedding, and Sophia's godfather. The same Preston who had consoled Griffin during Vanessa's frequent absences, who had seemingly supported their marriage through rough patches, who had spent countless holidays and family gatherings with them. "Maybe," Griffin replied, careful to keep his voice even. "Sometimes work meetings happen in different places." That night, after putting Sophia to bed, Griffin accessed his home security archives. He rapidly scanned through weeks of footage, focusing on Vanessa's private calls. In a recorded conversation from her bathroom, the only place she believed was free from potential monitoring, he found the exchange Sophia had mentioned. "Theo's getting suspicious," Vanessa whispered into her phone. "I told him we're exclusive, but he's starting to ask questions about the weekends I spend with you," Preston's voice replied through the speaker. "You're overthinking this. Griffin's completely clueless. He's so busy with his cases he probably wouldn't notice if you disappeared for a month. Just tell him it's another conference. We'll have the lake house to ourselves again." Vanessa laughed softly. "And what about Griffin's little spy? Sophia nearly caught me packing lingerie last time. Bring her one of those science kits from the Children's Museum. She'll be so distracted she won't even notice you're gone." The conversation continued, revealing an affair that had lasted 18 months. Not with Dr. Theo Blackwell, as Griffin had initially suspected, but with Preston. Even more disturbing were their casual discussions about Griffin's eventual removal from their lives. "Once I get primary custody, we'll have everything we need," Vanessa said confidently. "Griffin's work history makes him vulnerable. All those late nights, the dangerous cases he takes. My lawyer says it's just a matter of documenting his instability and obsessive tendencies with work." Preston's response was even more chilling. "Don't worry about the custody battle. I've got connections. Just follow the plan, and by this time next year, it'll be just the three of us." Griffin sat motionless in his home office, the betrayal washing over him in cold waves. Not just his wife but his oldest friend. Not just an affair, but a calculated plan to take his daughter. His finger hovered over the call button for his attorney, but he paused, a different strategy forming. They believed Griffin was oblivious, too consumed with work to notice their deception. They planned to use the legal system against him to paint him as unstable and unfit. They had no idea they were conspiring against someone whose entire career was built on uncovering hidden truths and preserving evidence others thought was destroyed. Griffin closed the video file and opened a new document. He would not confront them immediately. He would not reveal what he knew. Instead, he would become the architect of a different kind of evidence. One that would ensure Sophia remained with the parent who truly protected her interests. As he began typing, Griffin felt a cold clarity replace his initial shock. Vanessa and Preston had grossly underestimated who they were dealing with. They thought themselves clever conspirators, but they were merely amateurs playing a game whose rules Griffin had mastered long ago. The true battle hadn't even begun. Chapter 2: Digital Footprints. For 3 months, Griffin Mercer lived a carefully choreographed double life. To Vanessa, he remained the seemingly oblivious husband, working long hours, and expressing only mild concern about her frequent absences. Meanwhile, he constructed an elaborate digital framework that documented every aspect of her betrayal. Griffin installed specialized software on Sophia's tablet, a birthday gift Vanessa had insisted their daughter needed that mirrored all activity to his secure server. He placed a discreet GPS tracker in Sophia's favorite stuffed elephant, which accompanied her on weekend visits to Aunt Melody's house, Vanessa's convenient cover for her trips to Preston's late property. Most importantly, he modified Sophia's seemingly innocent unicorn watch with parental GPS tracking that Vanessa had approved, to include audio recording capabilities activated by a simple triple-tap pattern that he taught Sophia as a secret game. "Remember, Princess," Griffin explained as they sat in their special fort made of blankets one evening. "Our special watch game is just between us, like spies in your books." Sophia nodded solemnly, her small fingers practicing the triple tap on the watch face. "And it saves our secret messages. Right, Daddy?" "That's right. And only we can listen to them later on our special computer program." Griffin felt a pang of guilt using his daughter this way, but reminded himself it was ultimately for her protection. "But it's very important that you only use it when you hear grown-ups saying important things." "Okay." One Tuesday afternoon, Griffin received an unexpected alert from his home security system. Vanessa had returned early from work and was in their bedroom with someone. Griffin remotely accessed the feed from his downtown office, watching as Preston Wade, his supposed best friend, entered the master bedroom with Vanessa. "We need to accelerate the timeline," Preston said, loosening his tie. "I've spoken with Judge Lowell. She's sympathetic to your concerns about Griffin's mental state, especially after I showed her those edited case notes where he obsesses over surveillance details." Vanessa looked uncertain, but we agreed to wait until after Sophia's school year ends. "A custody battle now would be it has to be now," Preston insisted. "My contact at the hospital board mentioned they're considering Griffin for a major digital security overhaul. If that goes through, he'll have even more credibility as a stable provider." Griffin watched stone-faced as they continued strategizing. Preston had apparently been making payments to Vanessa's divorce attorney for months. They had already compiled a dossier of manipulated evidence, selectively edited conversations where Griffin discussed complex cases. Photos of his home office with case files spread out made it look obsessive rather than methodical. Testimonials from concerned friends about his work habits. Most disturbing was Preston's casual mention of a therapist who was prepared to testify that Griffin showed signs of paranoia, based on anonymous session notes Preston had provided. "What about Dr. Blackwell?" Vanessa asked. "We still need his statement about Griffin's confrontational behavior at the hospital fundraiser." Preston smiled. "Theo's on board. I've been feeding him altered emails supposedly from Griffin for months, questioning his research ethics. He's primed to testify about Griffin's threatening behavior and unfounded accusations. The judge will eat it up." Griffin ended the feed, a cold fury replacing his initial shock. Preston wasn't just having an affair with his wife. He was orchestrating a sophisticated character assassination, leveraging his connections as a pharmaceutical lobbyist to undermine Griffin's reputation and parental rights. That evening, when Vanessa announced she needed to work late, Griffin initiated the next phase of his counterplan. He called Sophia's pediatrician, Dr. Kathleen Moore, a straight-talking woman who had known the family since Sophia's birth. "I need your professional opinion documented," Griffin explained, after outlining his concerns. "I believe Sophia is being manipulated in preparation for a custody dispute." Dr. Moore's voice was cautious but supportive. "This is a serious allegation, Griffin. I'll need to see Sophia for an evaluation before I can provide any documentation." That's exactly what I want, Griffin replied. A neutral professional assessment before this goes any further. The following week, Dr. Moore's evaluation confirmed Griffin's fears. Sophia showed signs of emotional confusion consistent with parental manipulation. More concerning were subtle behavioral changes, suggesting she was being coached to view her father's work as scary and dangerous. Words a 6-year-old would unlikely choose independently. Armed with this professional assessment, Griffin contacted attorney Diana Vega, a former prosecutor renowned for her ruthless efficiency in family court. After signing an NDA, Diana reviewed the evidence Griffin had compiled. "This is extraordinarily thorough," she remarked, examining the timeline of events, recorded conversations, GPS data, and professional evaluations. "Most clients come to me with suspicions and emotions. You brought me a complete case file. Will it be enough?" Griffin asked. Diana's expression turned grim. "Preston Wade has significant connections in family court. Judge Lowell, who would likely preside over your case, belongs to the same country club as his father. We'll need something definitive, something that neutralizes their entire strategy at once." Griffin leaned forward. "I'm working on that. But in the meantime, I need you to prepare as if we have nothing else. They're planning to file within weeks." As Diana outlined their legal strategy, Griffin's phone buzzed with an alert from Sophia's unicorn watch. The audio file contained a conversation between Vanessa and Preston while driving Sophia to ballet class. "Need to get her comfortable with the idea of calling you daddy after the custody hearing," Vanessa was saying. "I've been telling her stories about how you'll all live at the lake house." "What about Griffin?" Preston asked. "Kids get attached to their fathers. I've been working on that too, telling her that daddy's work makes him see bad things that aren't really there. That sometimes he makes up stories because of his job looking for bad people." Vanessa's voice lowered. She started to believe it. "Yesterday she asked me if daddy was sick in his mind because he always checks the locks twice." Griffin ended the recording, his resolve hardening. In their arrogance they had underestimated two crucial factors: Griffin's technological expertise and, more importantly, Sophia's intelligence. They were so focused on manipulating the system that they failed to consider that Sophia herself might become their greatest obstacle. That night, as Griffin tucked Sophia into bed, she looked up at him with solemn eyes. "Daddy, Mommy says you see things that aren't really there because of your job. Is that true?" Griffin carefully controlled his expression. "My job is to find things that are hidden, Sophia. Things that are real but that some people try to hide. It's like being a detective." Sophia considered this, then nodded. "Like when I hide things under my bed but you always find them?" "Exactly like that," Griffin said, smiling despite the heaviness in his chest. "I find things that are really there even when people think they're hidden. I think I want to do your job when I grow up," Sophia declared, clutching her stuffed elephant. "You already have a good start," Griffin replied, tapping her unicorn watch gently. "You're very good at noticing important things." As Sophia drifted to sleep, Griffin returned to his hidden office behind the bookshelves in his study, a room whose existence Vanessa had forgotten years ago. Inside, he activated a program that would begin the final phase of his countermeasure, a comprehensive digital trap designed to capture the true nature of those conspiring against him. The pieces were in place. Now he simply had to wait for his opponents to make their move. Chapter 3, The First Hearing. The custody hearing arrived faster than Griffin anticipated. Vanessa filed emergency motions claiming Griffin's increasingly erratic behavior posed a danger to Sophia. Judge Helen Lowell, exactly as predicted, was assigned to the case, her connection to Preston's family securing the favorable appointment. "This is a clear ambush tactic," Diana Vega fumed as they prepared in a conference room at the courthouse. "Emergency motions are for immediate danger, not manufacture concerns." Griffin remained calm, reviewing their response documents. "It's actually better this way. They've shown their hand early." The courtroom was more crowded than typical for an initial hearing. Griffin noticed several colleagues from the hospital board where Preston lobbied positioned strategically in the gallery. Dr. Theo Blackwell sat directly behind Vanessa's attorney, his expression professionally concerned. Even Vanessa's parents, Lawrence and Marilyn Harlow, who had always treated Griffin with polite distance, were present. Their matching expressions of grave worry clearly rehearsed. Judge Lowell entered, her gaze briefly meeting Preston's before she took her seat. "We're here on case number 2023, FC 1078 Emergency Custody Modification. I understand Mrs. Mercer is seeking temporary full custody pending evaluation." Vanessa's attorney, Maxwell Thornton, whose retainer Griffin had tracked to Preston's offshore account, stood confidently. Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Mercer has documented concerns about Mr. Mercer's increasingly paranoid behaviors, including intrusive surveillance and psychological manipulation of their daughter. Griffin watched Vanessa's performance with clinical detachment. Her navy dress and minimal jewelry projected appropriate maternal concern. Her expression cycled perfectly between worry and reluctance. A woman forced to take drastic action to protect her child. Judge Lowell turned to Diana. Counselor Vega, your response? Diana stood, her posture impeccable. Your Honor, we categorically deny these allegations and question both their timing and motivation. Mrs. Mercer's emergency petition conveniently omits her 18-month extramarital affair with Mr. Preston Wade, Mr. Mercer, as former friend and Sophia's godfather, and their coordinated efforts to alienate Mr. Mercer from his daughter. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Vanessa's composed facade cracked momentarily before she leaned to whisper frantically to her attorney. Maxwell recovered quickly. Your Honor, these inflammatory and unsubstantiated accusations are precisely why we're concerned about Mr. Mercer's state of mind. He's creating elaborate conspiracy theories to explain normal co-parenting disagreements. Diana smiled thinly. We have substantial evidence, Your Honor. However, before presenting it, we request Dr. Kathleen Moore be permitted to testify regarding her professional evaluation of Sophia. Judge Lowell frowned, clearly annoyed by this deviation from her expected script. This is highly irregular for an emergency hearing counselor, as is filing emergency motions without genuine emergency circumstances. Diana countered smoothly. Dr. Moore is Sophia's pediatrician since birth with significant concerns about recent behavioral changes. After brief arguments, Judge Lowell reluctantly allowed Dr. Moore's testimony. The pediatrician's professional reputation made her difficult to dismiss, particularly with several medical board members in attendance. Dr. Moore's testimony was measured but damning. She detailed specific behavioral changes in Sophia consistent with parental alienation tactics. She described Sophia's confusion about her father's character, believing her previously beloved father was suddenly dangerous and sick in the mind. In my professional opinion, Dr. Moore concluded, Sophia is being systematically coached to fear her father despite having no history of such fear in her previous 6 years. This represents a concerning form of emotional manipulation that could cause lasting psychological harm. Maxwell attempted to undermine Dr. Moore's testimony by suggesting she had limited information and that Griffin, as the technically sophisticated parent, could have manipulated Sophia's perceptions of events. Judge Lowell appeared receptive to this line of questioning, her occasional glances toward Preston growing more frequent. When Griffin took the stand, Maxwell's questioning grew increasingly hostile, focusing on Griffin's surveillance work and suggesting his professional paranoia had seeped into his personal life. Mr. Mercer, isn't it true that you've installed extensive surveillance equipment throughout your home? Maxwell demanded. Yes. As a security consultant, I maintain appropriate security measures, Griffin replied evenly, including recording devices in your 6-year-old daughter's bedroom. There are security cameras in common areas of our home, including hallways outside bedrooms with appropriate privacy protocols, Griffin clarified. These were installed with my wife's full knowledge and consent when Sophia was an infant, and we've maintained them for general home security. Maxwell produced a document with a flourish. Yet according to this psychiatric evaluation, you display symptoms consistent with surveillance-related paranoia and obsessive tendencies that could be harmful to a child's development. Griffin examined the document, noting immediately that it was signed by Dr. Raymond Foster, a psychiatrist he had never met. I've never been evaluated by this doctor, perhaps not formally, Maxwell conceded with a smile. But Dr. Foster has reviewed extensive documentation of your behavior patterns provided by concerned individuals in your circle. Judge Lowell interjected. Mr. Mercer, are you denying that your work involves surveillance and security measures that might appear unusual to others? The leading question confirmed what Griffin already knew. The judge was not an impartial arbiter in this case. He glanced at Diana, who gave a subtle nod. Your Honor, Griffin replied carefully, my work involves digital forensics and security analysis. These skills have made me particularly attentive to unusual patterns in my personal life, including my wife's extended absences, secretive communications, and recent efforts to alienate our daughter from me. Maxwell pounced. So you admit to monitoring your wife's movements and communications? This is precisely the controlling behavior Mrs. Mercer has cited as concerning. Before Griffin could respond, the courtroom door opened, and a court officer escorted Sophia inside. The child looked nervous but determined, her unicorn watch prominently displayed on her small wrist. Behind her walked the court-appointed guardian ad litem, Monica Reeves, whose expression suggested something unexpected had occurred during her interview with Sophia. "Your Honor," Monica addressed the court, "I apologize for the interruption, but Sophia has been insistent about speaking with you directly. Given the circumstances of this case, I believe it would be appropriate to hear what she has to say." Judge Lowell appeared conflicted. Allowing a 6-year-old to speak in court was unusual, but denying her might appear prejudicial, particularly with so many observers present. "Very well," she finally said. "Given the child's age, I'll speak with her in my chambers with both attorneys present." "No." Sophia's voice was surprisingly firm. "I need to show everyone something important." On Mommy's phone, the courtroom fell silent. Vanessa's face drained of color. Judge Lowell studied the determined child. "Young lady, what is it you need to show us?" Sophia stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly but clear. "I found videos on Mommy's phone. Uncle Preston told Mommy to say bad things about Daddy that aren't true. They practiced what to say to the judge." She turned to Griffin. "I remembered our special game, Daddy. I triple-tapped my watch when they were talking, but then I found Mommy's phone had videos too." Griffin felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. Sophia had gone beyond their spy game and taken initiative in a way he hadn't anticipated. Vanessa stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. She's just repeating what Griffin coaches say. Children shouldn't be involved in." "I didn't want to steal Mommy," Sophia interrupted, tears forming in her eyes. "But you and Uncle Preston said Daddy is sick and dangerous, and I'd never see him again. You said the judge would believe you because Uncle Preston's daddy plays golf with her." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Lowell's face flushed as she banged her gavel repeatedly. "I think," Diana Vega said into the momentary silence that followed, "that we should view whatever evidence Sophia has brought forward, and then perhaps discuss the appropriate boundaries of judicial relationships." Monica Reeves stepped forward. "Your Honor, I've reviewed the video in question as part of my duties. I can confirm it shows Mrs. Mercer and Mr. Wade coaching each other on testimony, discussing their relationship, and explicitly mentioning connections to influence this proceeding." Judge Lowell's expression had transformed from irritation to alarm as the implications for her judicial reputation became clear. "This court will take a 30-minute recess. Counsel for both parties, Ms. Reeves, and Court 1T personnel will review this evidence immediately in the conference room. The child will remain with court services during this time." As they filed out, Griffin caught Vanessa's venomous glare. For the first time she seemed to truly see him, not as the oblivious husband she could manipulate, but as a formidable opponent, who had anticipated her every move. But even Griffin hadn't anticipated Sophia's decisive intervention. His daughter had just changed the entire trajectory of the case with a courage and clarity that left him both proud and shaken. The real battle was only beginning. Chapter 4. Realignment of Forces. The courthouse conference room crackled with tension as Judge Lowell, both legal teams, and the court's IT specialist huddled around a monitor displaying Sophia's evidence. The first video taken from Vanessa's phone showed her and Preston in what appeared to be a hotel room, rehearsing her testimony about Griffin's dangerous obsessions and psychological manipulation. "No, that doesn't sound convincing," Preston critiqued in the video. "You need to tear up when you mention how he tracks Sophia's movements. Make it about fear, not control." Vanessa practiced again, her performance more emotional. "I became terrified when I discovered hidden cameras throughout our home. What kind of father monitors his child's every move?" Preston nodded approvingly. "Much better." Lowell responds to maternal instinct narratives. Her rulings consistently favor mothers who demonstrate appropriate emotional distress. The video continued with explicit discussion of how they had manipulated Sophia to fear her father, including Preston suggesting specific phrases for Vanessa to teach the child. Most damning was their casual mention of Judge Lowell's connection to Preston's family, and their certainty of a favorable ruling. The second piece of evidence was audio from Sophia's unicorn watch. A conversation between Preston and Vanessa while they thought Sophia was asleep in the back seat of Preston's car. "Once Griffin's out of the picture, we'll need to get Sophia into therapy with someone who'll document any concerning statements about missing her father," Preston was saying. "I've already spoken with Caroline Bennett. She'll guide the sessions toward appropriate conclusions if we get her on retainer before the final custody determination. What if Sophia doesn't cooperate? Vanessa asked. She's stubborn like Griffin sometimes. Kids are adaptable. Once she understands her father isn't coming back, she'll adjust. My contact at the pharmaceutical board assures me Griffin won't find work in Pittsburgh after we're done. He'll have to relocate, and distance will do the rest. Judge Lowell stopped the playback, her expression thunderous. Miss Reeves, please confirm the authenticity of these recordings. Monica Reeves nodded. The court's technical expert has verified they haven't been altered. The timestamps and metadata are consistent with Mrs. Mercer's own devices. Your Honor, Maxwell began desperately, children often misinterpret adult conversations without proper context. The context seems remarkably clear. Counselor, Judge Lowell interrupted, her voice ice cold. I'm recusing myself from this case effective immediately due to the apparent conflict of interest. Additionally, I'm referring this matter to the Judicial Ethics Committee and the District Attorney's Office for investigation of potential witness tampering and conspiracy to commit fraud upon the court. She turned to the court clerk. Please have Judge Rodriguez assume this case immediately and arrange for Mrs. Mercer and Mr. Wade to remain in the building pending potential contempt proceedings. As Judge Lowell stormed out, Maxwell Thornton approached Diana with a considerably diminished demeanor. We should discuss settlement terms. Diana's smile was shark-like. I'm afraid that opportunity passed when your clients involved a 6-year-old child in their machinations. Mr. Mercer is no longer interested in negotiation. 30 minutes later, Judge Miguel Rodriguez, known for his strict adherence to ethical standards, entered the courtroom. After reviewing the evidence and hearing abbreviated arguments, he issued an immediate temporary order granting Griffin full custody of Sophia, with Vanessa limited to supervised visitation pending criminal investigation of her conduct. As court adjourned, Griffin knelt to embrace Sophia, who ran to him from the court officer's care. You did something very brave today, he told her gently. I'm so proud of you. Sophia's small arms tightened around his neck. Uncle Preston said you wouldn't be my daddy anymore, but that was a lie, right? A complete lie, Griffin assured her. I will always be your daddy no matter what. As they prepared to leave, Preston Wade was being escorted from the building by sheriff's deputies. His carefully cultivated image of successful pharmaceutical lobbyist had crumbled into that of a desperate man facing potential criminal charges. He locked eyes with Griffin briefly, his expression a mixture of hatred and disbelief. Griffin merely nodded once. Acknowledgement of an opponent utterly defeated before turning away. Preston had underestimated not only Griffin's capabilities, but also the bond between father and daughter. It was a miscalculation that would cost him everything. Later that evening, as Sophia slept in her room, truly safe for the first time in months, Griffin received a call from Diana. Vanessa's attorney reached out again, she reported. They're offering complete custody to you in exchange for not pursuing criminal charges. Griffin's laugh was without humor. They still think this is a negotiation. What's your next move? Diana asked. Griffin looked at the wall of his home office where he'd assembled a comprehensive map of Preston's professional network. The pharmaceutical executives, hospital administrators, and political figures who had built their careers on Preston's influence. Influence that, unbeknownst to them, Griffin had spent months documenting in excruciating detail. Preston and Vanessa conspired to take my daughter by manipulating the legal system, Griffin replied calmly. They were willing to destroy my relationship with Sophia, my professional reputation, and my future. This was never just about custody. You're going after his entire network, Diana realized. I'm ensuring that the full extent of Preston's influence becomes public record, Griffin clarified. What happens to those who benefited from his methods will be determined by the appropriate authorities. After ending the call, Griffin reviewed the encrypted files he'd been compiling. Evidence of how Preston had leveraged patient data from pharmaceutical trials to pressure hospital administrators, how he facilitated payments to researchers for favorable study outcomes, how he'd systematically build a network based on compromising information rather than legitimate pharmaceutical advocacy. Griffin had originally gathered this information as insurance against Preston's custody maneuvers. Now it would serve a broader purpose: the complete dismantling of the system that had enabled Preston's confidence in manipulating justice. Vanessa had been a willing participant, but Preston was the architect. Griffin would ensure that both faced the full consequences of their actions, beginning with the criminal investigation already underway, and extending to every professional relationship they had cultivated. As he uploaded select documents to secure servers designated for the district attorney's investigation, Griffin felt no satisfaction, only resolute determination. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about protecting Sophia, and about ensuring that systems meant to protect children couldn't be corrupted by influence and deception. The fact that this justice would utterly destroy Preston Wade and everyone who had enabled him was simply an inevitable consequence. Chapter 5: The Counter-Offensive. 3 weeks after the dramatic courtroom revelation, Griffin sat in District Attorney Eleanor Vasquez's office, surrounded by evidence binders he had meticulously prepared. Eleanor, a career prosecutor with a reputation for incorruptibility, reviewed the final document with raised eyebrows. "This goes well beyond witness tampering and attempted custody fraud," she observed, closing the binder. "You've documented what appears to be a systematic pattern of corruption across multiple institutions." Griffin nodded. "Preston Wade built his career on compromise and coercion. The custody case against me was simply an extension of how he operates in every sphere." "And you gathered all this when exactly?" "I began monitoring Wade's activities 3 months ago when I discovered his affair with my wife," Griffin explained. "Initially his self-protection, then as a more comprehensive investigation, once I realized the extent of their plans." Eleanor studied him carefully. "Most people in your situation would have confronted their wife, filed for divorce, and fought the custody battle conventionally. Most people don't have my background in digital forensics," Griffin replied evenly. "And most people haven't watched their supposed best friend systematically attempt to erase them from their child's life." The district attorney shuffled through photographs, showing Preston with various hospital administrators and pharmaceutical executives in compromising situations, all apparently gathered through Griffin's surveillance operation. "Some might call this obsessive," she noted. "Some might call it thorough," Griffin countered. "Every piece of evidence was obtained legally through public records, financial disclosures, and monitoring of my own property where these individuals chose to meet." Eleanor nodded slowly. "The grand jury will convene next week. We'll start with the witness tampering and judicial influence charges against Wade and your wife. The broader corruption investigation will proceed separately." As Griffin left the district attorney's office, his phone buzzed with a message from Diana. "Vanessa requesting urgent meeting, says she has information you'll want to hear." Griffin considered ignoring it, but curiosity prevailed. He agreed to meet Vanessa at Diana's office, where their conversation would be both legally protected and thoroughly documented. Vanessa arrived looking markedly different from her courtroom appearance. Gone was the polished pharmaceutical representative. In her place sat a woman in simple jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back without styling, dark circles beneath her eyes. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, her voice subdued. Griffin remained silent, waiting. "I know you have no reason to listen to anything I say," Vanessa continued. "But there are things you should know about Preston. Things I only discovered after everything fell apart," such as Griffin prompted when she hesitated. "He's been recording us. You, me, Sophia for years, since before we even considered." She faltered. "He is a dedicated server with organized files on everyone in his network. Insurance, he called it." Griffin kept his expression neutral despite his surprise. "And you know this how?" "After the hearing, when they released me pending charges, I went to his condo to collect some things I'd left there. He was in custody, but I still had the key." She pulled out a small flash drive. "I found this hidden in a false bottom of his desk drawer. It's an index of his server contents with sample files." Diana took the drive, inserting it into an isolated computer not connected to their network. The files revealed exactly what Vanessa described: an extensive catalog of recorded conversations, and compromising information organized by person and potential usefulness. "Why are you showing us this?" Diana asked. Vanessa's eyes remained fixed on Griffin. "Because Sophia is on that list. He has plans for her that I didn't know about until I saw this. Plans that continue regardless of what happens to him legally." Griffin's calm facade cracked slightly. "Explain. Preston doesn't just want to remove you from Sophia's life. He wants to control her future completely." Vanessa's voice shook. "There are files outlining a developmental path for her. Schools he's already arranged her acceptance to through donations, medical research programs she's been preselected for when she's older. He's been mapping her entire life without either of us knowing." Griffin reviewed the documents, ice forming in his stomach as he recognized the pattern. Preston hadn't just seen Sophia as collateral damage in their custody battle. She was a long-term project, a potentially valuable asset for his pharmaceutical connections due to her intelligence and observational skills. "Why would you participate in this?" Griffin demanded. "I didn't know," Vanessa insisted. I thought he loved me, that we would be a family." Her composure cracked. "I was a fool. He was using both of us. Me to get to Sophia, you, as an obstacle to remove. There are recordings of him discussing me with his associates, describing me as temporary and replaceable once the custody is secured." Diana looked skeptical. "This could be an elaborate attempt to gain sympathy, Griffin." "It could be," Griffin agreed, studying his estranged wife. "But the pattern matches what I've already uncovered about Wade's operations. He doesn't form attachments, he creates assets and removes obstacles." Vanessa wiped tears from her face. "I've already given copies to my attorney to provide to the district attorney. I'm cooperating fully with the investigation. I don't expect forgiveness, Griffin. I don't even expect reduced charges. But Sophia deserves protection from whatever he's planned." After Vanessa left, Diana turned to Griffin. "Do you believe her? About Wade's server and plans for Sophia?" "Yes," Griffin replied. "About her ignorance of those plans? No. Vanessa is intelligent and observant. She chose to ignore red flags because Wade offered what she wanted: status, excitement, freedom from family responsibilities. She seems genuinely concerned about Sophia now." "Maternal instinct finally overriding ambition," Griffin observed coldly. Too late to change what she set in motion. That night, Griffin implemented enhanced security protocols at their home. If Wade had indeed been monitoring them for years, conventional measures might be compromised. He conducted a complete sweep, discovering 3 sophisticated surveillance devices he hadn't previously detected. One in Sophia's bedroom bookshelf concealed inside a decorative unicorn, another in the kitchen smoke detector, and a third in the living room television soundbar. The discovery confirmed Vanessa's claims while raising disturbing questions about how long Preston had been planning this operation. The devices were not recent installations. This showed signs of having been in place for at least 2 years. As Griffin removed the final device, Sophia appeared in the doorway of her bedroom, clutching her stuffed elephant. "Daddy, are you finding the bad things?" Griffin set down his tools. "What bad things, sweetheart?" "The listening toys." Sophia approached, pointing to the disassembled unicorn figurine. "Uncle Preston gave me that for Christmas. He said it was special because it could hear me read stories." Griffin kept his voice carefully even. "Did Uncle Preston give you other special toys?" Sophia nodded. "My ballerina music box and the Star Night light. He said they were magical because they remembered my dreams." Each item Sophia mentioned contained sophisticated monitoring equipment when Griffin examined them. The music box with audio recording capability, the night light with a concealed camera. Preston had essentially created a surveillance network within a child's bedroom, hidden inside seemingly innocent gifts. The discovery pushed Griffin's calculating demeanor to its limit. This wasn't just about custody or control anymore. It was about a level of violation that transcended normal boundaries. Preston Wade hadn't just betrayed his friendship. He had systematically monitored a child for his own purposes while pretending to be a trusted figure in her life. Griffin contacted Eleanor Vasquez immediately, providing photographs and technical specifications of the devices. Her response was swift. Search warrants for all of Preston's properties would be executed within hours. By morning, the investigation had expanded dramatically. Preston's server farm, hidden in a climate-controlled room beneath his lake house, contained terabytes of surveillance, data on dozens of individuals, including comprehensive monitoring of Griffin's family going back to Sophia's infancy. Most disturbing were the detailed files on Sophia herself, psychological assessments performed without parental knowledge, developmental tracking, and specific plans for her optimal career trajectory in pharmaceutical research based on her observed aptitudes. As the evidence mounted, Griffin's strategy evolved from defensive protection to aggressive dismantling of Preston's entire operation. The man had weaponized the child's trust. There will be no limits to Griffin's response. Chapter 6. Systematic Dismantling. The grand jury indictment against Preston Wade contained 27 counts ranging from witness tampering and attempted fraud upon the court to illegal surveillance, corporate espionage, and conspiracy to commit child exploitation. The breadth of charges reflected the elaborate nature of his operations, and the multiple jurisdictions involved. Vanessa faced lesser but still serious charges. 7 counts including perjury, conspiracy to commit witness tampering, and child endangerment. Her cooperation agreement with prosecutors had mitigated but not eliminated her legal jeopardy. 2 months after the initial hearing, Griffin sat across from District Attorney Vasquez, reviewing new developments in the case. The investigation had expanded beyond Pittsburgh to include federal authorities as evidence of Preston's pharmaceutical influence operations crossed state lines. Wade's attorneys are still pushing for a plea agreement, Eleanor informed him. They're offering comprehensive cooperation against his pharmaceutical contacts in exchange for reduced charges. Griffin's expression remained impassive. And your response? We're proceeding to trial, she replied firmly. His surveillance operation targeting a child removes any consideration of leniency. The U.S. Attorney's Office agrees. Griffin nodded, satisfied. Preston's attempt to negotiate his way out of consequences aligned with his pattern, always looking for leverage, for a way to transform even defeat into some form of advantage. This time, however, the evidence was too comprehensive, the violations too egregious for procedural maneuvering. As the criminal cases proceeded, Griffin focused on Sophia's recovery. The discovery of such extensive monitoring had initially frightened her, necessitating specialized therapy to address her sense of violation and rebuild her sense of security. Dr. Kathleen Moore had recommended Dr. Nora Wilson, a child psychologist specializing in technology-facilitated trauma. Sophie is making remarkable progress, Dr. Wilson reported during their weekly update. She's demonstrating resilience by actively participating in creating her new safe bedroom protocols. Griffin had completely renovated Sophia's bedroom, allowing her to select every detail from paint colors to furniture. More importantly, he had implemented a technology transparency system where every device in their home was visibly labeled with its capabilities and purpose. No hidden cameras, no disguise monitoring. Everything explicit and explained at a child's level of understanding. And the nightmares? Griffin asked, decreasing in frequency. The safety rituals are helping. Your nightly all-clear room checks give her concrete reassurance. The conversation shifted to discussing Vanessa's upcoming supervised visitation, her first since the court hearing. Despite her cooperation with prosecutors, the court maintained strict limitations on her access to Sophia, requiring professional supervision and prior approval of discussion topics. Sophia has questions about her mother, Dr. Wilson explained. She's struggling to reconcile the mother she knew with the person who participated in monitoring her. It's important these questions find age-appropriate answers. Griffin agreed, though his personal feelings toward Vanessa remained unchanged. Her betrayal might have been less calculated than Preston's, but it was betrayal nonetheless. A willingness to sacrifice her daughter's well-being and relationship with her father for personal gain. The supervised visit took place at a neutral facility designed for such situations. Griffin watched through one-way glass as Sophia cautiously approached Vanessa, stopping several feet away rather than embracing her. "Hi, Mommy," she said, her voice small but steady. Vanessa had clearly been coached by her attorney on appropriate behavior. Her greeting was warm but restrained, her body language non-invasive. "Hello, sweetheart. I missed you so much. Dr. Wilson says you're sorry for the bad things," Sophia stated, watching her mother carefully. Vanessa nodded, tears forming. "I am Sophia. I made terrible mistakes that hurt you and your father. I wasn't a good mother, and I'm very, very sorry." "The listening toys were wrong," Sophia continued, her voice gaining confidence. "Nobody should listen to kids without asking." "You're absolutely right," Vanessa agreed. "What I allowed to happen was wrong. There's no excuse." The conversation continued with Sophia alternating between childlike discussions of school activities and surprisingly direct questions about her mother's actions. Vanessa maintained appropriate responses throughout, neither defending her behavior nor attempting to shift blame. As the visit concluded, Sophia asked the question Griffin had been anticipating. "Are you coming home when you're not in trouble anymore?" Vanessa glanced toward the observation window, knowing Griffin was watching before turning back to Sophia. "No, sweetheart. Your daddy and I won't be living together anymore. But I hope someday, when I've shown that I could be trusted again, I could be part of your life in a new way. Sophia, consider this. Daddy says trust has to be earned back slowly. That's why we have the label technology now, so I can learn to trust things again." "Your daddy is very wise," Vanessa replied softly, "and he loves you very much." In the observation room, Griffin felt no satisfaction watching Vanessa's careful interaction with her daughter. There was only the grim recognition that Sophia's childhood had been irrevocably altered by adult betrayal, requiring her to develop awareness and caution beyond her years. Later that week, Griffin received an unexpected call from Lawrence Harlow, Vanessa's father. The older man had remained conspicuously absent since the court hearing, neither defending his daughter nor reaching out regarding Sophia. "I'd like to see my granddaughter," Lawrence stated without preamble. Marilyn and I had no knowledge of Vanessa's actions or this Preston character's plans. Griffin's response was measured. "Sophia has enough to process without additional complications. When her therapist indicates she's ready for expanded family contact, I'll reconsider." "We're her grandparents," Lawrence insisted. "We have rights." "You appear in court to support allegations you knew were false," Griffin replied coldly. "You were willing participants in an attempt to remove me from her life based on fabricated concerns. Those actions have consequences." After ending the call, Griffin added Lawrence's contact attempt to his ongoing documentation. While focusing on Sophia's well-being remained his priority, he continued methodically tracking all connected parties to Preston's network, including Vanessa's parents, whose financial records showed substantial recent deposits from accounts linked to Preston's consulting firm. The pattern was becoming clear. Preston had created an extensive influence operation with tentacles reaching into every aspect of Griffin and Sophia's lives, from the court system to extended family. Each new discovery reinforced Griffin's resolve to dismantle every element of that operation, regardless of collateral damage to those who had facilitated it. As criminal proceedings accelerated against Preston and his associates, Griffin maintained his methodical approach. This wasn't about revenge, he reminded himself. It was about comprehensive security. Every person who had participated in the conspiracy against him and Sophia represented a potential ongoing threat. Each required appropriate containment. The courts would handle criminal charges, but Griffin's own operation extended further, ensuring that Preston's network was not merely prosecuted, but completely neutralized in ways that would prevent any future attempt to access or influence Sophia's life. It was, he reflected, exactly the kind of systematic approach he employed in his professional work, identifying security vulnerabilities and implementing comprehensive countermeasures. The fact that these particular vulnerabilities involved personal betrayal, and that the countermeasures would destroy multiple careers and reputations, was simply an operational reality, not revenge, justice. Chapter 7: Revelations and Consequences. 6 months after the initial court hearing, Preston Wade's trial began. The prosecution's case had expanded dramatically as the investigation uncovered the full scope of his operations. What started as charges related to custody interference and witness tampering had evolved into a complex RICO case, involving pharmaceutical kickback schemes, blackmail of medical researchers, and systematic exploitation of confidential patient data. Griffin sat in the courtroom gallery each day, his expression impassive as witnesses detailed Preston's methods. Former pharmaceutical executives testified to how Preston leveraged compromising information to secure contracts. Hospital administrators described how he manipulated research priorities through strategic pressure on board members. Former associates outlined his surveillance techniques and data collection operations. Most damning was the testimony from Dr. Caroline Bennett, the therapist Preston had planned to use for Sophia after gaining custody. Her testimony revealed that Preston had approached her 2 years earlier, establishing a financial relationship through consulting fees, while gradually introducing the concept of potentially working with Sophia in the future. Mr. Wade described the child as having exceptional observational abilities that could be directed productively with the right guidance. Dr. Bennett testified. He suggested that her father's influence was problematic, and would eventually need to be managed out of her development. The testimony confirmed what Griffin had suspected. Preston's interest in Sophia wasn't merely collateral to his relationship with Vanessa. He had identified specific qualities in Sophia that he considered valuable, and had been methodically positioning himself to control her development long before the custody battle began. During a court recess, Assistant District Attorney Martin Kelly approached Griffin. Wade's attorney has requested another meeting about a potential cooperation agreement. Given the current testimony, they're getting desperate. Griffin's response was cold. My position hasn't changed, no deals. Even if his cooperation could expand the case against others in his network. The evidence we've already provided is sufficient, Griffin replied. Wade is attempting to salvage leverage. I won't provide him that satisfaction. Later that day, Vanessa took the stand as part of her cooperation agreement. Her testimony walked a careful line, acknowledging her willing participation in the custody scheme, while portraying herself as manipulated regarding the broader conspiracy. She detailed how Preston had gradually drawn her into his plans, exploiting her dissatisfaction with her marriage and ambitions for career advancement. "He made me believe Griffin was holding me back," she testified, avoiding her estranged husband's gaze. "That my research sales career could advance significantly with the right connections." The affair began as professional mentorship and evolved into something more personal, but always with an underlying agenda I didn't fully comprehend until after our plans collapsed. The prosecutor pressed for specifics. "When did you become aware that Mr. Wade was monitoring your daughter without your knowledge?" Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. "I discovered some of the surveillance equipment 3 months before the custody hearing. Preston claimed it was for Sophia's protection to document any concerning behavior from Griffin. I convinced myself to believe him because it aligned with what I wanted to believe about my husband at that time, and the plans for Sophia's future, the predetermined educational and career path Mr. Wade had documented. I only discovered those after his arrest," Vanessa insisted. "I never would have agreed to using my daughter as some kind of project." Griffin listened to Vanessa's careful testimony, noting how she balanced admitting culpability with portraying herself as another of Preston's victims. It was a calculated performance designed to minimize her legal consequences, while establishing a foundation for eventually rebuilding a relationship with Sophia. He felt no anger watching her, only clinical detachment. Vanessa was operating from self-interest as she always had. The difference now was that Griffin recognized it clearly without the obscuring lens of trust or affection. The trial's most dramatic moment came when Griffin himself testified, methodically outlining how he had discovered the conspiracy and gathered evidence. His testimony was precise and unemotional, detailing the technological methods he had employed and the pattern of behavior he had documented. Preston's attorney attempted to portray Griffin's evidence gathering as obsessive and potentially illegal, suggesting that his surveillance of his own home violated privacy expectations. "Mr. Mercer," the defense attorney pressed, "isn't it true that you began monitoring your wife without her knowledge, essentially creating the same kind of surveillance state you accuse my client of establishing?" Griffin's response was measured. "I installed security systems in my home with my wife's full knowledge when our daughter was born. When I observed concerning patterns in my wife's behavior, I reviewed footage from those existing systems. A standard security protocol when anomalies are detected, and the recording devices provided to your daughter, the spy games you taught a 6-year-old. A modified watch my wife had approved for Sophie is used to include audio recording after documenting multiple instances of concerning conversations in her presence. The game was a child-appropriate way to provide Sophia agency in a situation where adults were attempting to manipulate her." The defense attorney's aggressive questioning backfired, as Griffin's responses highlighted the fundamental difference in approach. His monitoring had been defensive and limited to protecting his child, while Preston's had been comprehensive, strategic, and designed to control both Sophia and her parents for his own purposes. When Preston finally took the stand in his own defense, the contrast was stark. Where Griffin had been measured and precise, Preston appeared increasingly desperate as his testimony progressed. His initial confidence deteriorated under cross-examination as the prosecutor methodically exposed contradictions in his claims. "Mr. Wade," the prosecutor asked, "you testified that your interest in Sophia Mercer was simply that of a concerned godfather. How do you explain these documents outlining a 17-year development plan for her, including predetermined research positions at pharmaceutical companies where you held influence?" Preston's composed facade cracked. Those were potential opportunities one was creating for her benefit. Griffin's influence was limiting her potential with his paranoid worldview, and electronic surveillance of her bedroom since age 4. Was that also for her benefit? "Security measures," Preston insisted, sweat visible on his forehead. "Griffin's work created potential threats, yet you never informed her parents of these security measures. In fact, your own recorded conversations with Vanessa Mercer indicate you deliberately concealed them." As the cross-examination continued, Preston's testimony deteriorated further. His attempts to justify his actions became increasingly contradictory, until finally, in a moment of frustration, he abandoned his careful script. "Someone needed to ensure that child's potential wasn't wasted," he exclaimed. "Do you have any idea what someone with her observational capabilities could contribute to pharmaceutical research with proper guidance?" Griffin would have channeled her into digital security or some equally limited field. "I was creating opportunities." The outburst revealed what Griffin had long suspected. Preston viewed Sophia not as a child to protect, but as a resource to develop, a potential asset whose natural abilities could be harnessed for his pharmaceutical network if properly controlled from an early age. The jury deliberated for just 7 hours before returning guilty verdicts on 23 of 27 counts. Judge Rodriguez scheduled sentencing for the following month, but the immediate remand to custody made the outcome clear. Preston Wade would spend decades in federal prison. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Griffin for comment. He provided only a brief statement. Today's verdict confirms what the evidence has shown, that Preston Wade created an elaborate criminal enterprise that endangered numerous individuals, including my daughter. I'm grateful to the prosecutors and investigators who worked to bring this case to justice. As reporters continued shouting questions, Griffin noticed Vanessa standing at the periphery of the crowd, her expression unreadable. Their eyes met briefly before Griffin turned away, escorted to his waiting car by Diana Vega. "Congratulations," Diana said once they were driving away. "The verdict was everything we could have hoped for." Griffin nodded, feeling no triumph or satisfaction, only a weary relief that this phase was concluding. Sophie is what matters now, rebuilding her sense of security after everything she's experienced. "And, Vanessa?" Diana asked carefully. "The sentencing recommendation from a prosecution is favorable given her cooperation. She'll likely receive minimal incarceration, possibly even probation." "That's between her and the court," Griffin replied. "My focus remains on Sophia's well-being, and ensuring no one in Wade's network can ever approach her again." Diana studied him. "The network is dismantled, Griffin. Preston's going to prison for decades. The pharmaceutical executives who enabled him are facing their own charges. Even Vanessa's parents have been implicated in financial improprieties. At some point, this has to end." Griffin's expression remained impassive. "It ends when Sophia is secure, not before." The response revealed what had become increasingly clear throughout the proceedings. Griffin Mercer's methodical dismantling of Preston Wade's operation wasn't merely about justice or even protection. It had evolved into something more absolute: the systematic elimination of every possible threat to his daughter, regardless of collateral consequences to those involved. Not revenge perhaps, but something equally uncompromising. Chapter 8: Reconfigured Realities. 1 year after Preston Wade's conviction, the landscape of Griffin and Sophia's lives had transformed completely. They had relocated to a custom-designed home in a gated community outside Philadelphia, where Griffin had established a new digital forensics consultancy focused on protecting vulnerable populations from technological exploitation. His experience with Preston's surveillance operation had created a unique specialty that attracted clients ranging from domestic violence shelters to child advocacy centers. Sophia, now 7, had adapted to their new environment with remarkable resilience. Her therapy continued with Dr. Wilson, who had relocated her practice to accommodate her young patient. The nightmares had largely subsided, replaced by a determined interest in understanding technology, particularly security systems and privacy protections. "Is this one the safe cameras, Daddy?" Sophia asked one afternoon, pointing to a new security installation near their front door. "It is," Griffin confirmed, lifting her to examine the device more closely. "See the blue indicator light? That means it's on our secure network, not connected to the internet." "And what's our rule about cameras?" "All cameras must be visible and labeled with what they can see and hear," Sophia recited confidently. "No hidden watching allowed." Griffin smiled, setting her down. "Exactly right. No hidden watching ever again." Their new home incorporated sophisticated security while maintaining complete transparency about its functions, a philosophy Griffin had extended into every aspect of their lives. Sophia's school had been carefully selected for its strict technology policies and enhanced security protocols. Her new pediatrician and therapist had undergone extensive background checks. Even their neighbors had been researched before Griffin purchased the property. This careful curation of their environment had created a secure foundation for Sophia's recovery, but Griffin remained vigilant. The aftermath of Preston's conviction had revealed how extensively his influence had penetrated their former lives. Former colleagues, neighbors, even Sophia's previous ballet instructor had been discovered to have connections to Preston's network. Some unwitting, others complicit in various degrees of monitoring and information gathering. The divorce for Vanessa had been finalized 6 months earlier. She had received a 5-year probationary sentence with extensive community service requirements and permanent restrictions on working in pharmaceutical sales. The plea agreement Griffin had eventually approved, included Vanessa relinquishing all claims to custody, while maintaining limited visitation rights under continuous supervision. Their most recent interaction had been a conference call with Diana regarding Vanessa's request for expanded visitation, now that she had completed her required counseling program. The supervising social worker's reports have been consistently positive, Diana noted during the call. Dr. Wilson also indicates Sophia seems comfortable with the current visitation structure and might benefit from slightly longer sessions. Griffin remains skeptical. Has Vanessa maintained the appropriate boundaries we established? No discussions of returning to our previous family structure? No undermining of our current security protocols? Complete compliance according to all reports, Diana confirmed. She appears to be genuinely focused on rebuilding a healthy, appropriate relationship with Sophia within the established parameters. After careful consideration and consultation with Dr. Wilson, Griffin approved a modest expansion of visitation hours, while maintaining all supervision requirements. His decision wasn't based on forgiveness. He had none to offer Vanessa but on Sophia's continued well-being and development. That evening, as Griffin prepared dinner, Sophia sat at the kitchen counter working on her tablet, a specially modified device with comprehensive parental controls and monitoring that she fully understood and had helped configure. "Daddy, can I ask you something serious?" she said suddenly, looking up from her work. Griffin turned from the stove. "Of course, Princess, anything. Will you ever forgive Mommy and Uncle Preston for what they did?" The direct question gave Griffin pause. He sat beside his daughter, giving her question the consideration it deserved. "Forgiveness is complicated, Sophia," he began carefully. "When people do harmful things, especially to children, the most important thing isn't forgiveness, but making sure everyone is safe and protected from further harm." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "Dr. Wilson says sometimes forgiveness helps the person who is hurt more than the person who did the hurting." "That can be true for some people," Griffin acknowledged. "But for me, making sure you're safe and creating a life where you can trust the world around you is more important than forgiveness." "So you won't ever forgive them?" Sophia pressed. Griffin met his daughter's gaze directly. "No, Princess, I won't. But that doesn't mean you can't form your own opinions as you grow older. When you're an adult, you might view things differently than I do, and that's okay." Sophia considered this. "I think maybe someday I might forgive Mommy a little bit, but not Uncle Preston. He put cameras in my unicorn." Despite the seriousness of the conversation, Griffin smiled at her definitive boundary. "That seems like a reasonable position to me." As they returned to dinner preparations, Griffin reflected on how much their lives had changed, and how some fundamental aspects remained constant. His determination to protect Sophia was unwavering, but he recognized the importance of allowing her to process her experiences in her own way, forming her own conclusions about forgiveness and trust. This delicate balance was tested 2 weeks later, when Lawrence and Marilyn Harlow, Vanessa's parents, filed a formal petition for grandparent visitation rights. Despite their implication in Preston's financial operations, they had avoided criminal charges through cooperation agreements similar to Vanessa's. "They're claiming they've been completely cut off from Sophia without valid cause," Diana explained during an emergency consultation. "They've hired Marshall Thornton, Maxwell's father, and a specialist in grandparent rights cases." Griffin's expression darkened. "They supported false allegations against me in court. They were financially linked to Preston's operations. They encouraged Vanessa's participation in the custody scheme." "All true, but they were never charged with crimes directly related to Sophia," Diana cautioned. "Pennsylvania has relatively strong grandparent visitation statutes when a parent has been limited by court order, as Vanessa has been. I want to have Sophia exposed to their influence," Griffin stated flatly, "not after everything she's been through." The hearing was scheduled with Judge Rebecca Anderson, known for her balanced approach to family disputes. Griffin prepared methodically, compiling evidence of the Harlows' connections to Preston's network while avoiding any appearance of simply being vindictive. In court, Marshall Thornton portrayed the Harlows' as loving grandparents, who had been unfairly cut off from their granddaughter due to their daughter's mistakes. "Mr. Mercer has systematically isolated this child from her maternal family, Your Honor. Whatever mistakes Miss Mercer made should not result in Sophia losing relationships with grandparents who have only shown her love and support." Diana countered with specific evidence. Text messages showing the Harlows had discussed Sophia's value to Preston's long-term plans and financial records documenting payments they had received while actively supporting the custody scheme against Griffin. Most compelling was Dr. Wilson's professional assessment. Reintroducing individuals who participated in the surveillance and manipulation of Sophia, even peripherally, would undermine the security framework we've carefully established for her recovery. Her current stability is built on absolute confidence that everyone in her environment is transparent and trustworthy. Judge Anderson reviewed the evidence carefully before delivering her ruling. While I recognize the general importance of grandparent-grandchild relationships, this case presents extraordinary circumstances. The documented participation of Mr. and Mrs. Harlow in activities that directly threaten Sophia's well-being overrides presumptions of access. The petition for grandparent visitation is denied. As they left the courthouse, Griffin noticed Lawrence Harlow attempting to approach them. He immediately positioned himself between the older man and Sophia, his expression warning against any further advance. Lawrence stopped several feet away. "She's still our granddaughter, Griffin. This vindictiveness only hurts Sophia in the long run." "Your participation in Preston's schemes hurts Sophia," Griffin replied coldly. "Your support of false allegations against me hurts Sophia. Your willingness to profit from plans that treated her as an asset rather than a child hurts Sophia. I'm simply ensuring no further harm occurs." "People make mistakes," Lawrence insisted. "We've lost our daughter to this mess. Don't take our granddaughter too." Griffin's response was measured but final. "You didn't lose your daughter to a mess. You actively supported her participation in criminal conspiracy. Those weren't mistakes. They were choices with consequences. Sophia's well-being isn't one of those consequences I'm willing to compromise on." As Griffin led Sophia to their waiting car, he reflected on Lawrence's characterization of his actions as vindictiveness. From Lawrence's perspective, perhaps that evaluation seemed accurate. Griffin had systematically cut off every person connected to Preston's network from access to Sophia regardless of their degree of involvement. But from Griffin's perspective, this wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about creating an uncompromised environment where Sophia could rebuild her sense of security without reservation or doubt. Every person eliminated from their lives represented a potential vulnerability, a risk he was unwilling to accept regardless of family ties or social expectations, not vengeance. Protection. Chapter 9. Uncompromising Horizon. 5 years after Preston Wade's conviction, Griffin Mercer sat in the visitors area of Federal Correctional Institution, Petersburg, waiting for his first and likely only meeting with a man who had nearly destroyed his family. Preston had requested the meeting through multiple channels over the years, initially through his attorneys and later through prison administrators. Griffin had consistently refused until a particular message arrived. "I have information about Sophia's long-term security that wasn't covered in the trial." Now as Preston was escorted in, older, thinner, but still carrying himself with calculated composure, Griffin studied him with clinical detachment. The man who had once been his closest friend, and later his most dangerous adversary, now seemed diminished. His designer clothes replaced by prison-issued khakis, his confident stride reduced to the shuffling gait of a long-term inmate. "Thank you for coming," Preston began after they were seated across from each other. "I wasn't sure you ever would." "I'm only here because you mentioned Sophia's security," Griffin replied evenly. "Nothing else would have warranted this meeting." Preston nodded as if expecting this response. "How is she? 12 now, correct? Middle school." "I'm not here to provide personal updates," Griffin stated. "What information do you have?" Preston leaned forward slightly. "You were thorough, Griffin. More thorough than I anticipated, but there are contingencies even you couldn't have discovered. Arrangements I made before we ever became friends." Griffin's expression remained impassive, though his attention sharpened. "Explain." "When I first identified Sophia's potential, her observational abilities, her pattern recognition, I established certain long-term protocols. Trust funds under shell corporations, educational endowments with specific trigger conditions, research positions reserved through binding agreements." Preston's eyes took on an unsettling intensity. "Some activate when she turns 18, others at 21. None require my direct involvement to proceed." Griffin studied him carefully, looking for signs of deception. "You expect me to believe you're revealing this out of concern for her welfare? I expect you to believe I'm revealing it because I know you, Griffin. The not knowing would be intolerable to you. The possibility of overlooked threats would consume you." A ghost of Preston's former smile appeared. "Consider it professional courtesy from one strategic thinker to another." "Names," Griffin demanded. "Institutions, account numbers, every detail." Preston slid a folded paper across the table. "This will help you start unraveling the remaining threads. My final gift to the goddaughter, I'll never see again. Griffin pocketed the paper without examining it. Why the elaborate interest in Sophia? The trial established the custody battle was about controlling her development, but not why. Preston seemed to consider whether to answer truthfully before apparently deciding candor served his purposes. Do you remember when she was 4, and we took her to the Natural History Museum? She identified a misplaced fossil in the Mesozoic exhibit that the curators had overlooked for months. A child with no paleontological training spotted a pattern discrepancy that experts missed. Children notice details adults overlook. That's hardly unique, but her specific type of observational intelligence is. I worked with pharmaceutical researchers for 20 years, Griffin. The ability to identify anomalous patterns in complex datasets is the holy grail of drug development. Sophia has a natural aptitude that others spend decades trying to develop. Preston's expression became almost wistful. With the right guidance, she could have revolutionized pharmaceutical research methodologies. I wasn't trying to harm her. I was investing in extraordinary potential. Griffin's disgust was palpable. By surveilling her bedroom, by manipulating her mother, by attempting to eliminate her father, that wasn't investment. It was exploitation. Preston shrugged. Methods versus outcomes. You see violation where I saw cultivation. Regardless, you won thoroughly and completely. This wasn't a competition, Griffin stated flatly. It was protection of a child from predatory manipulation. Semantics, Preston replied. The result remains the same. My career destroyed, my freedom forfeit, my network dismantled. Even Vanessa, how is she handling her diminished visitation and supervised relationship with her daughter? That's not your concern. Preston studied Griffin with analytical interest. You never reinstated her parental rights, did you? Despite her cooperation, despite her apparent reformation, you remain uncompromising. I remain protective, Griffin corrected. Sophia's well-being isn't something I'm willing to gamble with, regardless of Vanessa's apparent changes. Any others? My former associates who had peripheral involvement, Vanessa's parents, the educators I had cultivated at Sophia's potential schools. Preston's tone was conversational, almost academic. Have you forgiven any of them? Allowed any back into your carefully constructed world? Griffin didn't answer, his silence confirmation enough. Preston nodded, a hint of professional admiration in his expression. You're more like me than either of us would care to admit, Griffin. Methodical, thorough, unwilling to accept vulnerability once a threat has been identified. We're nothing alike, Griffin stated, standing to indicate the meeting was concluding. I use those traits to protect. You use them to exploit. Purpose versus method, Preston countered. Another semantic distinction, but I appreciate you coming. It confirms what I suspected. You never stopped monitoring potential threats, never relaxed your vigilance, never compromised on Sophia's security despite the years that have passed. As Griffin prepared to leave, Preston added, one last thing, she'll need specialized guidance for her specific cognitive strengths. Conventional education will fail to develop her unique pattern recognition abilities. Don't let your justified distrust of my methods blind you to the reality of her extraordinary potential. Griffin left without responding, the paper from Preston secure in his pocket. Outside the prison, he immediately contacted his current digital security team, initiating protocols to investigate the information Preston had provided. Preliminary verification confirmed Preston's claims. There were indeed financial and institutional arrangements in place designed to activate when Sophia reached adulthood, creating pathways into pharmaceutical research that would appear as opportunities rather than manipulation. Over the following months, Griffin methodically dismantled these final elements of Preston's legacy. Trust funds were legally challenged and redirected to victims' compensation. Educational endowments with conditional terms were exposed and restructured. Research positions with hidden connections to Preston's former network were identified and flagged in secure databases. Throughout this process, Griffin maintained his focus on Sophia's continued development. Now 12, she had blossomed into a confident, academically gifted preteen with particular strengths in science and mathematics. Her interest in technology had evolved into formal coding studies, and her observational abilities, the same qualities Preston had sought to exploit, were being channeled into legitimate scientific pursuits under ethical mentorship Griffin had carefully vetted. During their regular weekend breakfast ritual, chocolate chip pancakes with scientific discussions, Sophia broached a subject Griffin had been anticipating. Dad, Mom asked if she could come to my science fair next month, she said, carefully gauging his reaction. Without the supervisor this time, what do you think? Griffin considered the request thoughtfully. After 5 years of supervised visitation, Vanessa had maintained consistent boundaries and appropriate behavior. Dr. Wilson had indicated that relaxing certain restrictions might be appropriate as Sophia matured and developed her own agency. How do you feel about it? Griffin asked, prioritizing his daughter's perspective. Sophia arranged her remaining pancake pieces in a precise pattern before answering. I think I'd be okay with it. She's different now, more honest about things, and I'm old enough to understand what happened before. Griffin nodded, respecting her assessment. We can discuss it with Dr. Wilson this week. If she agrees it's appropriate, we'll try it as a one-time modification to see how it goes. Thanks, Dad. Sophia's smile was genuine. I know it's hard for you to change the security protocols. The comment, innocently insightful, reminded Griffin how perceptive his daughter remained. Despite his efforts to shield her from the harshest realities of what had occurred, she had developed her own understanding of the protective structures he had built around their lives. Later that week, as they finalized arrangements for Vanessa's unsupervised attendance of the science fair, Diana raised the broader question during their monthly legal review. Have you considered a more comprehensive revision of the custody arrangement? She asked carefully. Sophie is older now, more capable of self-advocacy. Courts generally favor increased parental involvement when children reach adolescence, absent ongoing safety concerns. Griffin's response was measured. I've considered it, but my position remains consistent. Vanessa's previous willingness to participate in manipulating Sophia for personal gain represents a fundamental breach that can't be fully remediated by good behavior under supervision. And the Harlows? They've maintained their petition for grandparent visitation through annual reviews. The judges indicated their consistent effort might warrant reconsideration. No, Griffin stated flatly. Their involvement was knowing and deliberate. That boundary remains absolute. Diana studied him with the frankness their long professional relationship permitted. At some point, Griffin, this level of ongoing restriction may appear punitive rather than protective. Sophia will eventually form her own relationships as an adult. Wouldn't controlled reintegration under your oversight be preferable to her potentially seeking these connections independently once she's beyond your legal authority? It was a legitimate question, one Griffin had considered extensively. I'm not preventing Sophia from making her own decisions as she matures. I'm ensuring those decisions are truly hers, made without manipulation or hidden agendas. And if she eventually chooses to forgive those you cannot, Griffin's expression softened slightly, then she'll do so as an adult with complete information and without external pressure. I won't compromise on her protection while she's under my care, but I'm not dictating her lifetime relationships. This philosophy guided Griffin's approach as Sophia continued maturing. He maintained rigorous boundaries against those who had participated in Preston's schemes, while gradually increasing Sophia's agency within those boundaries. Supervised visitation with Vanessa evolved into structured, unsupervised interactions in limited context. Communication with the Harlows remained restricted to written correspondence reviewed by Dr. Wilson with potential for reconsideration when Sophia turned 16. Preston Wade remained permanently excluded, his multiple attempts to establish indirect contact through attorneys or former associates systematically blocked. The man who had orchestrated the most comprehensive threat to Sophia's autonomy would never again have access to her in any form. A boundary Griffin maintained with unwavering resolve. As for Griffin himself, the experience had permanently altered his approach to trust and security. Professional colleagues sometimes described him as pathologically thorough in his protection protocols. New acquaintances often found his verification procedures off-putting. Even potential romantic relationships faltered against his uncompromising standards for transparency and integrity. But Griffin accepted these consequences without regret. His primary responsibility remained Sophia's well-being, and on that measure his methods had succeeded. Despite the traumas of her early childhood, she was developing into a confident, emotionally healthy young woman with appropriate boundaries and a strong moral compass. On Sophia's 13th birthday, as they stood together on the observation deck of the Franklin Institute, her chosen celebration venue, she asked the question that had been forming in her mind for years. Dad, do you ever wish things had been different? That Mom hadn't betrayed us? That Preston hadn't tried to control everything? That we could have just been a normal family? Griffin considered the question seriously before answering. I wish you hadn't experienced trauma that no child should face. But the truth is, Vanessa and Preston revealed who they truly were through their actions. Knowing that truth, difficult as it was, allowed us to build something genuine and secure. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. I've been reading about forgiveness in my psychology books. They say holding on to anger hurts you more than the person you're angry at. That's often true, Griffin acknowledged. But there's a difference between anger and boundaries. I'm not angry at Vanessa or Preston anymore. That emotion served its purpose and dissipated years ago, but the boundaries I've established remain necessary and appropriate based on demonstrated behavior. So it's not about punishment or revenge. No, Griffin replied honestly. It's about protection and consequences. Actions have lasting impacts. Some bridges, once broken, cannot be fully restored. Not because of anger, but because trust requires more than good intentions after fundamental betrayal. Sophia considered this thoughtfully, her analytical mind processing the distinction. I think I understand. It's like our security systems. Not because we're afraid all the time, but because prevention is more reliable than reaction. Exactly, Griffin confirmed, impressed by her insight. And like those systems, the boundaries can evolve as circumstances change, but the fundamental commitment to security remains constant. As they watched the sunset from the observation deck, Griffin reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The devastating betrayals, the legal battles, the systematic dismantling of Preston's network, all of it had ultimately led to this. A father and daughter with an unshakable bond built on absolute honesty and unwavering protection. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but something perhaps more valuable. Clarity without compromise, security without surrender, and truth without accommodation. It wasn't the family Griffin had originally envisioned, but it was authentic, resilient, and absolutely secure. A foundation Sophia could build upon with confidence as she grew into her own remarkable potential, free from manipulation or exploitation. Not the ending many would have chosen, but the one Griffin had ensured through methodical determination and uncompromising resolve. The only outcome he could accept after those he trusted had revealed the truth of who they were and what they were willing to sacrifice, including his forgiveness. And there you have it. Thanks for watching, take care, good luck.
After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind, or maybe it has brought back some old memories. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories, and they connect all of us. Everyone has their own unique journey in life, and we all try to understand the world in our own way. These kinds of moments remind us that we are all human, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, and always learning something new. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with your friends. Your thoughts and feedback are always valuable to us, as they motivate us to create even better content. Every story has its own unique angle, and our goal is to understand everyone's perspective and make our content diverse and relatable. Stories like these help us realize that life's journey is different for everyone, and by hearing other stories, we learn something new. You can also share your own stories with us. Your experiences are valuable to us as well, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave your feedback. We aim to create content that brightens your mind and gives you new ideas every time. If you've already seen this video before, your feedback is still important. With every piece of feedback, we can improve our content and bring a new perspective to our viewers. Today, what we saw was just a small part of the many stories shared on Reddit and across the world. It's a reminder of how we all try to understand life by sharing our experiences with each other. This video was only an example of how we try to connect with others through storytelling, learning about different sides of life. We hope to continue sharing such stories that help us all learn and grow together. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon. If you haven't already, please like and follow for more amazing content. Your support keeps us going, and we will strive to bring you more thought-provoking and heartwarming stories. Until next time, take care and stay curious. **